Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the ManageSpace podcast. Today, we're joined with Brett by Copper Storage Management. Brett, just a little bit about myself. As my name is James McLean, and I'm a market analyst with Radius Plus. Something I get to do a lot is talk with people in the industry and hear their stories, their experiences, and kind of get to understand their pain points and how technology can be a solution. Could you just get started by telling me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I've been in the business since I could walk. I'm 28 now. I've never really done anything else. My dad got started back at public storage very, very long time ago as a district manager there, worked with Metro, and then branched off and started a consulting firm. And so since I can remember, seemingly he's been in storage. So I grew up helping with that consulting firm, spending summers traveling around with him, doing big due diligence projects for big companies, buying large amounts of storage facilities, and then, trailing with him to do feasibility studies, those kinds of things. And that company ended up turning into Self Storage 101, which is the largest consulting firm for storage. So I've been on the consulting side for a very long time. And then right after college, I decided, okay, I want to get more also in the operations side. So before I came back full time with Self Storage 101, decided to work for CubeSmart, which was a great decision. Getting to learn the operation side from the inside of it, it was fantastic. And then I came on full time at Self Storage 101 and did feasibility studies, due diligence, speaking engagements, training, those kinds of things all across the country. And really from that point, then we decided to make the management company.
Well, that's terrific. And that actually answers our first question, is how people get involved in the self-storage industry. And when you went away for school and had a break from working with your dad, did you ever did you ever think that you were going to come back to self-storage? Was that always your intent? What a part about the industry that kind of interests you so much?
Yeah, that's a funny question. The answer is really no. I never thought that I would end up staying in storage because storage isn't a very sexy, industry when you look at it from the outside and you think of things you want to do, right? You want to be, you want to get into music, you want to get into some exec somewhere, a cool tech company, or whatever the case is. Those are the kinds of things we want to do. And so when growing up with storage, I was like, this is the most boring, industry on the planet. But there's a billionaire who talks about, if you ever want to be successful, don't pick the sexy industries because you're going to compete too much and there's not enough money to be made. But really what happened is when I was probably 17, 18 years old, and it was summer one time, for college, I ended up going on a feasibility due diligence project, and I'm walking around with my headphones on, thinking, okay, I care a little bit more what these places are worth. I care more about money. I'm older. I'm not 10 anymore doing this. So I said, hey, what is this place worth? And Dad looked at me and said, probably about $6.5 million. And I was like, I have this list in my hand of all these things they're doing wrong. I mean, this is a horrifically ran facility. He's like, yeah, if they were doing all that, it'd probably be worth $8.5 million. And I was like, these aren't difficult things for them to be doing. It's all pretty much just standard practice type stuff. So that put a seed in my mind of saying, maybe this is successful. And then coming out of college, I felt like it would be a wasted opportunity with my knowledge, having had such a big head start in the industry. And then once I actually got back into it post-college, I absolutely loved it, became pretty passionate about it. I feel like we like doing things we're good at. And so I very much started to enjoy storage.
No, I mean, you guys are some of the biggest self-storage consulting group. Do you think most of your value comes from taking people who just need a little bit of help, like you said, making those small tweaks to add value for their business? Or kind of what is your approach to it? Do you ever face issues because you are younger and that you're dealing with industry veterans?
Yeah.
And you have a hard time sort of working with people, or hearing advice? Has that ever been an experience for you?
Yeah, for sure. That's by far been the most one of the most difficult hurdles, and some of it for good reason, right? I mean, you come out, you're cocky and you're smart. You think, okay, I know how to do this. And so the biggest thing that it taught me was, how do I approach people? How do I approach older people when I'm trying to? And it ended up being a very big just life lesson in general, right? If you're going to teach people how to do things, if you come at it kind of co-opted, if you come at it as a partnership, like you're helping them, you're not smarter than them. Right. People generally accept that kind of better. So once I got past the cocky part and I started just being confident, that helped. And then the biggest piece of advice I can give anybody young coming in is don't talk about things you don't know anything about. That's the biggest indicator. Older people will shut you down immediately if they can tell if you just start making up stuff to try and get to it and be impressed. People don't like that, so just be honest and talk about the things you know.
Great. So that is a great lead into one of my other questions, and I'm just curious to talk to you about, because you have talked to so many people in the industry, and you are young. Where do you think technology sort of integrates with self-storage? Because from the Radius side, I worked with a ton of people, and there's a lot of apprehension giving up data or working with big data sets to make decisions, because people have their methodology and say, hey, this has been working for me for 20 years. We know what I need to do to create a successful business. So kind of, where do you see the integration between big data sets and people just sort of being open-minded to accepting automation in their business to grow? And even if it means taking a step back to take a leap forward in your experience.
It's a really good question, because there are a lot of different types of technology you could use, right? I mean, some people have kind of figured out, okay, we are going to go full out tech with a no key system where it's super high tech, and it's a very touchless type experience. And then some people say, look, I've got a sign up at the facility that says, call me, and then they'll meet them down there one day a week to let them rent a unit, in the middle of nowhere. So it does differ, but by far storage benefits from technology. I mean, because it's such an easy product to sell to the customer without them having to see it, because all storage units are the same, right? As long as it's clean, it's either got climate controlled, it doesn't, but it's got 3 walls and a door. And so it's very easy for the customer to understand the product you're selling without you having to physically be there. So things like a really killer website, the ability for people to rent online, having a good management software, those lend itself really well. But of course, we deal with owners all the time. I remember up until really the last 5 years, every time I would do roundtables, I would have people still raise their hand that says, we do paper leasing. We're not doing e-rentals, which is very difficult. I cannot even fathom why people still do that, or they write, handwritten notes on note cards. There's always going to be a portion of that in the industry, but it has gotten less and less and less, because that tech means easier experience for the customer. It means a quicker experience for them. And generally, you make a lot more money when you're utilizing that tech. If you know what the market research says, well, what the high rates are. How those rates are changing if you use a product like Radius, for instance. We've used that for, at least it feels like a decade at least, with the self-storage consulting firm, because we have to know that market research. So if you're utilizing a product like that, it just ends up benefiting you and allowing you to make more money, because you know what you can charge, what your competitors are doing. And so that same benefit really translates to the rest of the tech in self-storage as well, like e-rentals allowing you to rent after, normal hours that your manager would be there before and after. So everyone's going to end up making that change. It's just some people are certainly slower than others.
Absolutely. Do you think there needs to be a fine balance? Because like you said, we use tools like Radius to understand the market, but there's always going to be, I always say this to our clients, like, you guys are the experts, you know your market best. Like, where there's going to be new housing developments, or you're next to a highway with tons of traffic, like certain things that we can't understand just from a bird's eye view on Radius. So how do you sort of work with your clients and a consultant firm to sort of find the best of both worlds and get information out of them that they may not even realize is a golden goose to make a decision?
The biggest piece is actually calling the competitor facilities, right? If you really want to understand demand, because we've over time developed ways that we can say, okay, based on the rates, the size of the facility, and the promotions they're giving, we have a pretty good estimate on how full they are. But still, that old-fashioned calling the facility, talking to a manager, going through the rental process, seeing how that works, that to me is probably never going to go away, right? That we're always going to interact with the facilities to get direct demand. But the truth is, the rest of it, really is pretty digital now. When we're getting square footage of the facility, those kinds of things, rates. But certainly calling, I think, will always have a place for sure.
No, I actually love that you said that, because some of the conversations we've been having in the industry seems very A or B. It's kind of like the old-fashioned way, a lot of legwork, or it's full data, full numbers. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people would agree that it really is a combination of both, and that you need to do both and understand both sides to have like the full picture and make a decision. So in terms of self-storage 101, how has things changed in the past like 2 or 3 years in terms of scaling, bringing on new team members, and where do you kind of see it going? I know you mentioned that you're doing roundtables. You guys are really establishing yourself as a big player in the industry, and like people come to you guys for advice and for direction when things happen. So what are your kind of vision for it?
It's funny because we've done about 800 feasibility studies at 101 a year for years now, and it's always been 3 or 4 consultants at 101. That's kind of the weird secret of it, is that somehow we always all of us were raised that way, that we have a work ethic. We don't need a ton of people. But then starting the management company was the exact opposite, because we just, all of a sudden we have to get this huge staff that's required to run these facilities. What's funnier about that is the whole reason that I said, okay, let's start a management company for remote facilities, that are going to be unmanned and utilize as much tech as we can, was because I was tired of training managers across the country, because the workforce that exists right now, what you can afford to pay people in storage for the numbers to work, you just don't have a lot of good people to pick from. It's become worse and worse. So I was like, look, I'm tired of hiring people. Let's make a management company that will revolve around only third-party management of remote facilities. And then the ironic part of that is now we have like 60, 70 employees on the management company. So I ended up having to hire all these people, but for good reason. The infrastructure we need, obviously you've got to have people, but kind of funny how that works. You try and get away from a problem with a solution, you end up having to do it on the other side to provide the solution.
Absolutely. And I'm really happy you brought that point up, by the way, in terms of getting good people for the historically with the price you get for a manager. With COVID-19, we've seen the great resignation. People are quitting jobs that they feel like maybe they don't have much growth potential in, or it may not be fulfilling for them. They start their own business, or they pursue other, careers, maybe in e-commerce or something like that. And so what we're seeing is, to your point, exactly what you said, is they're having a hard time finding a workforce for those kind of roles. And I think across the board, people are understanding that automation and the remote work is becoming more and more important. So you guys are clearly early adopters of that. What kind of signs did you see that led you to start this up? And do you think it would become more important down the line? And I guess, what are the pros and cons of having a remotely operated facility? I was curious as your viewpoint on that.
Sure. Yeah. So there are definitely going to be pros and cons. We were very fortunate in that when we decided to create the solution, it was right before COVID, right? So we said, okay, I'm 28. If I go to the airport, the only way I'm going to get on that plane is if I can self-check my bag or take a carry-on. I use the app. I don't go and talk to somebody. I rent with National Car Rental, so I can just go pick the car out. I don't have to talk to anybody. I prefer those fast experiences. So I said storage is a lot easier to rent somebody without being there than a car. A lot more goes into that than goes into renting them a storage unit. So once we kind of made that leap, next thing you know, COVID happens, right? And so it just, all of a sudden, we have the greatest returns for, the last 3 years. And we already had a system where we didn't have to change to fit the rental model that COVID kind of did. And so you saw almost 5 to 10 years of, change in self-storage happen in a year, where I think probably, we would have had that same growth in the next 5 to 10 years. And all of a sudden it has to happen immediately, because that's the only way we can do business in a lot of states. You saw CubeSmart all of a sudden, within a couple of months, they were doing 25% of their rentals online, without dealing with a person. That's a big deal for a company like CubeSmart. And then the rest of the REITs doing the exact same thing and making this huge push for online rentals. So it's kind of interesting that COVID helped, create a catalyst. But then as far as the actual pros and cons, the biggest pros are the cost savings, right? And the ability to use higher paid employees to run more stores, so you can spread out their cost across those, whether it's district managers or revenue management team, whatever it is that you're doing. That's a huge pro, because like I said, if it's just a facility by facility level, what you can afford to pay a manager on site, there's just not a lot of people looking for that work at that pay anymore. People want to work from home. That's kind of an interesting piece as well, that to compete with other jobs, you almost have to offer a work from home job to some extent, because people are going to turn down a little bit more money at a job they have to go to an office than a little bit less money to stay at home. People see that kind of as a big perk. So that's a big pro. The cost savings, just as is per facility level for, any ancillary costs like internet, supporting office costs, Word, all these small things end up helping a lot. And then obviously the biggest one being you can do business 24/7, any day of the week. And that ended up being a big piece. The only real con that kind of exists is, we've written, I think, 8 or 9 books on self-storage, and probably 6 of those talked about the importance of an on-site manager and the old school way of doing it. But the last book's like 8 years old, probably, I think is the newest of those books. So if you look at the old school way of doing storage, it's all right. You see your customer face to face. You walk up to the door. You hold the door open. They come in. You shake their hand. You take them to the unit. So it's hard for people to kind of get around that. But one of the cons of doing it remote is when they have to, let's say clean out a unit. Somebody moves out. Well, if somebody's there 5 days a week, soon as someone moves out, if it's Monday through Friday, they can go to the unit, clean it out, and make it ready to rent immediately. Well, with remote management, it's probably going to take a couple days. In our case, we have people go by 1 or 2 days a week, which is similar to other groups that are doing it now. So if someone moves out on a Tuesday, the person isn't coming back till Friday. Well, then you've got a couple days in between. But the trick is a couple days maybe slower to turn that unit around versus saving 50 grand a year isn't even equal. So that's kind of how you balance out those cons.
Got it. But coming from a manager background, because you were a manager at QSmart, is that correct? Yeah. Do you feel like there is sort of a lost art with the remote work, with remote management? Do you feel like there's any kind of intrinsic value that's lost without the person there, without the eye contact, shaking someone's hand? Although I'm not sure if that's happening since COVID-19, but do you feel like there's still sort of like some steps to take to create that human relationship? Because we speak with some people who are in tertiary markets, smaller towns, and it's less about having a product where you can store your stuff, because there's like trust that's involved. You say, hey, I know Brett, he's a trustworthy guy. We feel like our items are safe there. You're trusting people with personal belongings. So kind of how do you balance between those intangibles and then creating a successful business through this model?
We found the only way to replace that face-to-face customer interaction where customers would be satisfied to do business was we have to give them the ability to talk to a real person whenever they want to. And so in our case, within reason. So we said, okay, if we want to replace that, we've got to give them a real human being, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. So in any market US, that's what we did. So you can call and get a hold of a real person 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. That was the only way. Because if you just try and say, and there's groups who have been successful doing it on not on the management side, but on owning it. Okay, we're going to put signs up, a kiosk. They can't get a hold of anybody. They'll call in, leave a voicemail if they have a customer service issue, but we're not going to help them rent units. That exists. But what ends up happening is people, if they are frustrated, or if it is someone that's older and doesn't understand, how to do a rental online, they don't understand DocuSign, even though it makes it really easy. They don't understand how to get their gate code in, or maybe they're lost. Well, the trick to a customer is just communicate with them, or else they're going to be upset. And so if you have the ability for them to communicate as they get frustrated, we can resolve the problem very quickly. So that's by far that old school way of doing it. You still have to give them problem solving and tend to their needs in the moment as quickly as possible. So giving them a real person is definitely the only way to do that.
No, I love that. I agree 100%. And that makes complete sense to me. I'm curious. You mentioned that like you had your system in place. It was working, and COVID-19 was sort of a catalyst that just like sped things up. Was there any like growing pains associated? Was there ever a moment where you're like, oh, this is moving pretty quick? We're growing super fast. It's almost like suffering from success, I suppose. But what was your experience with like having to really, really ramp up because of so much demand and need for it?
Yeah, it's funny. Our clients are, if any of my clients see this that have been with us for years, they're all going to say, yeah, a year ago from November through January, because we are now the largest third party for remote. We have just under 150 facilities, and hopefully we'll be at 180, 200 by the end of the year with what's coming on. But we had a stretch where we essentially doubled the size of the company in a matter of a couple months, which we were not yet ready for. So, you're exactly right. It's hard to plan sometimes, especially in the beginning when you're still trying to get metrics, when you're trying to figure out how many people per number of calls, how many calls are going to come in per number of units, how many district managers do we need, how many revenue management staff, how many auctions are we going to do? And so in the beginning, you don't really have a good baseline to figure out those metrics. And so for us, growth was just getting slapped across the face with, oh my gosh, the amount of calls and auctions and all this. So we had to double up staff super quick. And then after that, learning period of those couple months, we were able to get a pulse on, okay, the oncoming stores mean XYZ worth of staff. And we got that down to a pretty good science. And so that allowed us. But yes, there was it was mostly the call center. There was a stretch that was rough. And thank you to all of our clients for sticking with us during those couple months. And any advice to a new business is use data. It is by far the most important. We recently hired an incredible woman named Tana Bryant who worked with the NSA. And when she came on, she said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so if you're starting a new company, you have anything like this going, you've got to figure out how to measure your metrics so that you can plan accordingly and manage accordingly. So that was a struggle for us in the beginning, for sure.
I love that. You can't measure it, you can't manage it. So what sort of metrics do you look like at your level from an operational standpoint? You're creating this system. What metrics do you use to determine kind of like the direction your facility is going? Obviously rates are good, but I just want to hear from you, like what metrics and reporting systems are you looking for in hand to help you make a decision, like from where you're at remotely or managing so many facilities? I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Yeah, no, it does. The most important for us is income. When we sell a facility, buy a facility, refinance, the number everyone cares about is your NOI, so that's first and foremost. We measure month over month gains. And then we do year over year gains as well. And so we're always trying to figure out, even if occupancy, stays the same, or sometimes in a lot of cases when a client buys a facility, because it's been so mismanaged for so long, a lot of people aren't paying their bills. They haven't done auctions. When we come in, we're probably going to do a lot of auctions and cut occupancy down. But while cutting occupancy down, we can still climb revenue. So revenue is by far the most important. The second most important metric we look at is, occupancy and rentals as a whole, because we've got to be able to, increase the occupancy of the facility. But again, income's most important. And typically that happens over time. The only thing that the industry is seeing right now, and I saw a great article from you guys in the last month, as well as Storable just sent out a video, I think this week, talking about the state of the industry right now moving forward, that, we do have net negative rentals as an average in the industry for the first time in almost, 15, 20 years, which is pretty crazy. So that revenue number is going to be even more important, because if we're all going to have a slow period of rentals, we've got to keep doing good rate increases while being fair. That way we're not having too many people moving out if move-ins are slow. We've got to have high tenant insurance penetration, so that way we can keep the income afloat while the industry is experiencing a slow turn.
Absolutely. I think that we're going to see a bit of a slow turn, like you mentioned, coming off of the highs of 2021. But that's very interesting. What would you say is like currently like a pain point for where Self Storage 101 is at right now?
Yeah, for 101, I would say, for 101, I would say that they're probably pretty solid. It's more of Dad's just getting near that place where he does more and more work from his boat, I think, at the lake house. So he's just getting more and more like Tommy Bahama every day, I think. So that's his pain point. For the management company, for Copper Storage Management, our biggest one is finding good quality people and being able to continue to refine the system. So we have a revenue management department. We have our own auction department, collections type department. And we have tiered agents. So making their systems and improving upon them to, when building, it's kind of easy. It's making it 10% better every year. That's the hard part. So that's kind of the biggest piece in finding and keeping good people. For us, all of our higher level people that are paid, our DMs and up, those kinds of groups, we have really good longevity from them, and we can find really good people. But when you're trying to find those base level people like call center agents, those kinds of things, it's very difficult. I think the average turnover right now in storage from a manager side is about 200% per year. So you think that means you're hiring 2 people for every job per year. So that's a big pain point for everybody. Just in our case, luckily the clients don't have to deal with it. We have to deal with it on the management side.
Got it. But no, to your point, that foundation is so important. Having people who care at every level creates that full experience.
Yeah.
Is there anything that would be on your wish list in terms of like reporting? When you do your work, is there ever say, hey, I wish I could see these metrics from this many years back? What would kind of be your ideal situation to make a decision in like an all-in-one report that would be ideal for you?
I know this will never happen unless, somebody like Storable, offered it, and I don't know how they ever would, but if we could ever see occupancies of all facilities, because it only benefits all of us, like storage, unless you're just in this crazy overbuilt market where it's super saturated, sharing information in storage doesn't hurt us. In most cases, knowing things like rates and occupancies allow all of the facilities to climb the ceiling of the facility higher and higher, and drive rates up together for that whole market. So if anything, if there would be more share of information, to look at things like occupancy, that would be huge. And then obviously any forecasting on demand over the next 2 years, but everybody's trying to do that right now and estimate what is the next 2 years going to look like. Is this going to be slow for a couple months? Is it going to be slow for a couple of years? So I think that's kind of the biggest piece. If we could figure out really what's going to happen in the market over this next year.
Great. I'm in complete agreement with the whole sharing information thing. It kind of goes back to the whole idea of people are just apprehensive of data, apprehensive of sharing data and technology. But I think, like we said, like it's going in the right direction. So hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years, we can see people get more on board and share your mindset on it. Has there ever been any like weird situation you've been put in or funny story that you want to share to kind of wrap up our chat?
We, oh my God, I have millions, I think millions and millions of those. Let's see, probably, this one is not funny. I do have a dark sense of humor. It's not funny at all. It's horrific. But it's very interesting. The things that kind of happen in storage facilities, and I've always, I've seen everything, you know what I mean? That happens all the time. But back when I was doing due diligence for, I would do probably 50, 60 facilities a year where I would travel, somebody's buying it, and we would do due diligence for them. I get there one time and I'm supposed to meet this manager, and I won't say where, obviously what the company is, but I'm supposed to meet her, and I'm like, hey, where's so-and-so? She's not here. And they said, oh, I'm so sorry. She quit yesterday. And I said, oh, okay, no, it's not a big deal. What happened? Why did she quit? Like, well, she had only been here a week so far. She just started, just finished training. She had her first day by herself at this storage facility. And she's doing a walkthrough and opens up a unit, and there's a dead body in the unit. And so obviously she quits. And so I was like, yeah, I probably would have quit as well. There's no way I would have stayed there. You're 100% right. So yeah, that's why you do walkthroughs at facilities, and don't, you got to get good security for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, very spooky story, and feel terrible for the employee. But yeah, to your point, I guess you hear new things every day, and it'll always keep you surprised.
Yeah, for sure.
Brett, do you have any questions for us?
No, other than thank you. Again, we've used you guys as the cornerstone of our reporting, both on the management company side, but certainly on the consulting side for a very, very long time. We've had a great relationship with Radius. Literally, I can't even think when it started. We've been using them so long. So, just thank you for that. The product's fantastic. Obviously, anything you guys keep adding is going to keep helping us. But yeah, thank you for a good product. It's made our lives much easier than having to all market research used to be a notebook and calling every single facility and asking every detail and going to the facilities. And we don't have to do all that anymore. And it's made it a lot easier.
Well, great. Thank you so much for your time, Brett. I appreciate the feedback. Really, it does make me a lot happy to see that people are getting a lot of benefit from our product. And hopefully with the ManageSpace system, we can also provide a stellar product that provides solutions, save you guys some time, and maximize revenue. I appreciate talking to you. I had a great conversation today. It's nice to see another young person in the industry, especially someone as wise beyond their years as yourself. So thank you for coming on the podcast, and I hope to connect in the future.
Of course. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.